the president and CEO of the Greater Kansas City Chamber of Commerce, and I'm just honored to be moderator for a special panel this afternoon. I hope we have a lot of fun. This is a unique thing that we're going to do this afternoon to really celebrate 25 years, but also to really reflect on a journey that's almost like none other that brings us to today. And it's going to be fantastic to hear those stories and relive that and understand how we came to today and where we're going in the future in this amazing place. I'm also honored, and I thank you very much for asking me to be the moderator. I sort of have a lot of history at the Med Center. My dad had a heart transplant here in the 80s, so for those of you that have been around a long time, I knew all the stripes, the yellow one and the blue one and all the rest of that. And both of my kids in the early 2000s were born here. And then as mayor of the Unified Government for 8 years, it was that period of time when the Heart Hospital and the Medical Pavilion were built. And I've really got to see this transformation in a personal way as well. And it's unbelievable what has happened here. And what I can say from even all the way back in the 80s is the people here have always been incredible. And that's been the core of what this has been. And then to see that journey with incredible people to the place that we are is really fantastic. So we're going to have some fun this afternoon and talk about that journey. We'll relive the past 25 years and the historic rise of the University of Kansas health system, from the challenging beginnings after the Kansas legislature created its independence to the world-class organization it is today. We're going to start with a video on a brief look back.
I am pleased to announce the creation of an independent public authority to operate the hospital portion of the University of Kansas Medical Center.
We were founded in 1906. By the mid-90s, we were a failing organization based on every metric that mattered. In 1998, we were reborn. Here is part of the story as told by those who had the courage to lay the groundwork for us to rewrite our history.
By 97, it was pretty obvious that the hospital was in some trouble. The reserves were about gone, and we even had staff telling us that within a year or so, you may have to consider subsidies for the hospital. Well, nothing gets the Ways and Means chairman's attention faster than that kind of talk. I was very willing to listen.
There were huge problems. It was the fiscal pressure that came about that was probably the leading drive to do something better than what we were doing, because what we were doing simply wasn't working.
Volume was declining. People in the community, when we surveyed, really didn't even know what KU Hospital was, if it existed, and if it existed, that you only went there if you had to. No one really wanted to go there.
It would take something extraordinary to preserve the hospital. We found it in a different organization, a different governance structure. We found it in a public authority.
We developed a model statute from looking at a lot of other organizations, and we presented it to the legislature in 1997, many of whom were hearing about the hospital situation for the first time. It passed in 1998.
There wasn't any doubt in my mind as a lifelong Kansan that we needed to keep the hospital going. It needed to survive and thrive. The question was how to do it. I had a lot of really, really fine people advising me that this was the right direction to go.
We also owed it to the citizens of Kansas, as well as our employees and our physicians, to change the course our hospital was on. We just needed a chance to operate differently.
The governor signed it on, I believe, the 17th of February, and we had 225 days then to create a completely new organization separate from the one that we were running, and we had to get it completed by the end of 1998, or else the deal was null and void, and we would have had to start over from scratch.
There are times when people ask me if I ever doubted that the hospital would make it. No, I never doubted it. There were times when I was just startled by the success and the way it was coming. There were several landmark things that occurred in the early years that I think put everything in place for where it is today.
During the first couple of years, there were several transactions that jump-started our journey. We bought our cancer program back from Salic. We created Jayhawk Primary Care, and we significantly enhanced our cardiovascular program by bringing a group of cardiologists and CT surgeons over from a local competitor.
At the same time, we focused on quality and patient satisfaction. We charged nursing with owning patient satisfaction and began our transformation of nursing through our magnet journey. Our vice chair of the board at the time, Dr. George Farha, reminded us every day that we were in business for one reason only, to take great care of our patients. He would often say,
"Patient doesn't care how much you know, till they know how much you care."
The strategy of leading with quality and service is a winning strategy, and that will continue to serve the health system well, and you are exporting it to new entities that the system is acquiring, and it's been great for the state of Kansas.
Well, I think everyone should be proud of the great turnaround that took place that has led to the success of the hospital. And the hospital is positioned better than any other hospital in this community and most places in the country for what lays ahead.
Our guiding formula, our focus on quality, service, and people, has driven our growth. We have the very best people, supported in the best and right way, and it is why remarkable things continue to happen. We're so grateful for all those people who, over the last 25 years, made this possible and who continue to support the health system and the patients we serve.
We've come a long way from those early days. We're proud, but we're never satisfied. Our vision is to lead the nation in caring, healing, teaching, and discovering. We are relentless in the pursuit of our vision. We will lead the nation.
You heard on the video the saying, Bob said it, and it's Bob and Tammy's favorite saying, proud but never satisfied. That's their book. That's their motto. There's also one that we could have used as a title, but it's already a song, and that's The Best Is Yet to Come. So the story that we're going to tell today, the journey we're going to go down, is really in 3 acts. What the hospital was like before 1998, how the act that created the authority came to be, and the early years of the authority itself. We have the important players here to talk about all of that as they remember how it happened and why this changed the face of healthcare in Kansas City and Kansas. For our first section, we're glad to have John Jackson with us. John, welcome. Thank you for being here. John was a senior vice president and chief administrator at the health system and was crucial in working with the Kansas legislature. In a few minutes, we'll also hear from Scott Glassrud, who served as chief financial officer, and both are Legacy Award recipients in the Health Systems Hall of Fame. We're also joined by Chris Reuter, senior vice president and chief operating officer of the Kansas City division. Chris has played critical roles throughout the health system's transformation over many years. To start, we're going to hear from Irene Thompson, the CEO who navigated the health system through troubled waters before and after the act. Irene couldn't be with us here today, but we recorded an interview with her and asked her to set the stage for this historic transformation.
I began to understand the complications of running this state-regulated hospital. And it started with the structure, being a state organization. We were bound by all the state rules and regulations that are designed for an agency as opposed to a hospital running a business. So that complicated many, many things. And also in terms of the structure, we were buried in the university and the medical school. And at times it was very difficult to see who had true accountability for decisions and actions. The CEO of the hospital that I was at that point in time was fully responsible for the outcome of the hospital, but very often had little authority to make the key decisions. So that whole structure issue was clearly a problem. And in terms of running the hospital under state regulation. You didn't have competitive salaries. We were operating at a loss. We had high turnover. So many, many issues, including a very poor reputation in the community.
We also have a video clip from Scott Glassrud now. Irene hired Scott. She called him overqualified for the position. We asked Scott why he said yes, and what were the financial realities prior to becoming independent.
We looked at all options, including closing or selling the hospital. And we quickly decided that closing or selling it wasn't the preferred option because the good news was we had a lot of support across the state. The state really wanted to have the hospital succeed. However, if nothing had been done and we stayed within the state environment, we would have, according to the consultant, lose $20 million annually, which would have required the state to subsidize those losses with appropriations. So that was really the financial situation for us.
Okay, we're going to go to our panelists here. John, I'm going to turn to you first. What was working at the time, and also what wasn't working at the time?
Let me know if you can't hear me in the back. What was working at the time primarily was around people. We had an excellent leadership under Irene. We had a chancellor who, for the first time in my history at the hospital, which had been 20 years about at that time, was interested in the hospital and was really trying to do what was necessary to make sure that the hospital was successful. We had a core group of employees, particularly those patient care employees, who were dedicated to their jobs, although they had to be very creative sometimes in working through the bureaucracy and the handicaps of a state classified system in accomplishing that. And finally, and I don't think this gets us enough credit, is we had a group of physicians in various areas who were highly innovative and really developing new knowledge and new technologies. But the rest of us didn't have, in the hospital system, didn't have the ability to help them move those into the mainstream at this location. And so many of those new developments arose at the University of Kansas Hospital, but really were popularized and made stronger when those physicians moved to a different location where they could get the resources that they needed.
Great. And John, is there a story from that time that really reflects the challenges that the team was facing?
Well, there's a couple of them. One of the things that Irene didn't mention, I think, was the loss of retained earnings through being a state agency. So in effect, what would happen was the hospital didn't get any state money, but it generated its own income. And when the DRG system came in, this is high art technology I'm talking about here, but at that time, academic medical centers actually did quite well under that system of finance. But as the hospital did well and had more income than expenditures, those monies were swept or used to offset the budget for the medical center or other activities that were going on in the state. And so we had no real way to build a legacy of cash or capital to invest back in the hospital. The other thing that Irene mentioned was the multiple, the 1,000 points of veto is what we like to call it, with the state bureaucracy. So Irene reported for decision making to the Medical Center Administration, to the regents, to the sometimes the state building committee would get involved, the legislature would get involved, the governor would have to authorize any of these things. So there were lots of ways to sidetrack any kind of decision that needed to be made on a timely basis. So the physicians in the hospital jointly decided that it would be really good to have an ambulatory care center out west, what's now known as KU Midwest, for those of you who know the health system. It took us 4 years to get that developed. Pretty much the answer was, if you can't point us to a statute or a regulation that says you can open an ambulatory care system, you can't open an ambulatory care system. So it took us a long time. We finally got provisos on the legislature to allow us to enter into that transaction with the physicians group. The physicians group actually bought the property. We leased it from them. And then we were told, well, you actually have to get permission from the state to have this lease. So there was another 6 months of going back through. And remember, the legislature was only in session 4 months a year. So those are just a couple of examples of some of the handicaps that I think Irene didn't mention.
Good examples, John. Chris, I'm going to turn to you. It's pretty well known the University of Kansas health system has world-class people. What was it like to have really good people, but who didn't have the structure and the resources they needed to be successful?
I agree with John. We had many incredibly committed people. And I think what we didn't realize is what potential actually was before us. From day to day, we just did what we did. And I think we accepted the status quo that we were in. So as John mentioned, we had to be incredibly creative sometimes and very resourceful. And I think my most vivid memories of that were around supplies and equipment. So there were times that we didn't have some of the basic things that we needed to provide patient care. We did a fair amount of borrowing equipment from hospitals, and I remember that during the middle of nights and on weekends, and we would call, and we had some pretty good relationships formed at that time to get the things that we needed. That wasn't every day, but that occurred. We also had times that we had to make trips to local businesses and stores to get supplies for patients, things that were pretty basic in nature as well. Specifically remember making trips to Strasser Hardware. Thank goodness they were just down the street. And things like locks and fans for patient rooms. And so those were times that staff were very resourceful, and we just did what we needed to do to take care of patients, and the creativity and resourcefulness, I think, were, albeit good, what we found over the course of time as we worked ourselves out of those times.
Right. It's fair to sort of think in your mind, what if this hadn't happened, this transformation, this moment in time? And Irene talked about this on video, whether there was any path forward beyond independence.
I didn't see one, but what we did is we engaged in an outside consultant so that we had an independent view of what the problems were and what the options were. And the consultant overwhelmingly recommended this change in structure that we were proposing. And as that consultant presented to the hospital board, as it wasn't really a fiduciary board, to the university chancellor and the university team, and then on to the Board of Regents, it was a very easy decision that this was the route to go because the hospital was failing. There was no question it was at great risk. So they were willing to follow the advice.
Finally, to you again, Chris. You talked a little bit about going to Strasser on behalf of patients to get them what they need. We wanted to ask you about hearing everything through the patient's voice. How did you try to meet patients' needs during this time, and what has changed over time as well?
You know, looking back, I think the contrast was meeting needs then versus exceeding expectations today. And that shift clearly has happened over the past 25 years. I don't remember there being a continual mindset of improvement from day to day. And in fact, when you think about quality, we had a triennial measuring stick of quality that was the Joint Commission. And so every 3 years, the Joint Commission would come in and they would tell us how we were performing from a quality standpoint. And that really was kind of a stake in the ground in terms of how we were doing, because that wasn't what we were looking at certainly every day. I very specifically remember spending an entire staff meeting trying to come up with one quality improvement example to put on a poster for the upcoming Joint Commission visit for surveyors as they would come around the hospital. We were told we've got to have a quality improvement story. We truly spent an hour trying to think, what have we done that we could put on a poster? So that's where we were in terms of certainly meeting the needs of patients, providing good care. Were we always providing excellent, great care? Maybe not every day. So the change that has happened, I think, is today the relentless pursuit of excellence in everything that we do, whether that is quality or safety, patient satisfaction, employee, provider engagement and satisfaction. That just was not the culture then.
Great. Now that we've set the stage for why change was needed, we're going to learn how the 1998 Legislative Act came to be. One of the hallmarks of things that are transformational is that they seem like no-brainers now, but at the time they were not a sure thing at all, and that's definitely true of the Act. Please give a warm welcome to Legacy Hall of Fame honoree and former Kansas Senator Dave Kerr of Hutchinson. And to Dave's left, to the Honorable Bill Graves, 43rd Governor of the state of Kansas and also a Legacy Hall of Fame honoree. Governor. Along with the late Bob Hemingway, the University of Kansas Chancellor in 1998, Governor Graves is the face that you see most at the celebration announcing the act. It was John who said that without the commitment of Governor Graves, the independent authority would have never happened. The same very well could be said for former Senator Dave Kerr. He was first elected to the legislature in 1985 and eventually became Senate President. And our friend Frank Ross served as an important counsel throughout the process, offering legal advice and a fair amount of maneuvering to bring the legislation home. John, I'm going to go to you. We've set the stage a bit, but explain why passing the act was so critical to the hospital's future.
Well, as it's been discussed, all of the difficulties that we had trying to run a business under a state agency format that wasn't really designed for that. And if you look back to that time, one of the things that was occurring was the rise of the more competitive healthcare organizations, new players coming into the field, new technologies being rapidly adopted, and there was really no way for the structure that we had, given what you've heard of all the time it takes to get decisions made and accomplished. The Act enabled us to do that because the Act was a catalyst for the hospital's innovation that had been hidden for so long. When we were writing the Act, we put in the stuff, all the different rights and responsibilities and obligations that a private organization would run under the structure of a hospital authority board, a state governance board, but a private individual organization. And so all those things that were necessary, we were able to do. Getting that act through the legislature and getting them to understand what the value of that was a different story, but it was well worth the effort.
So on the ground, the commitment was made, we need to get this act passed. And then we get up to Topeka. Senator, I'm going to turn to you. You're in the Kansas Senate, and you're the chair of the Ways and Means Committee. Give us a sense of how the act got passed and why you supported it. I know it wasn't as easy a task as it may seem today, for sure.
Well, I can give an example of how we were dealing at that time with the hospital to show just how ineffective we were. I recall in the mid-90s when the hospital came in for their annual budget review, and they told us they needed a new lithotripter. And none of us knew there on the committee what in the world a lithotripter was. But a few minutes later, after it had been explained to us and so forth, we were deciding whether the hospital ought to be able to buy a lithotripter. And then they had to go do the same thing in the House of Representatives in their committee, then go through the whole committee, and then on the floor of the House and the floor of the Senate, and then to the governor to have the bill signed. So we knew that this wasn't a very effective way of doing business, but as a result, I was very receptive when the Chancellor Bob Hemingway came in the early days of the '97 session and said, Dave, you know that the hospital just isn't working, and you also know that you're going to have to start subsidizing us in the near future if we don't do something. Well, there's nothing gets the attention of someone who has a responsibility of balancing the state budget than having to subsidize something more. So I was all ears when he described what you all had figured out as a game plan. And he says, we've got a plan here that might work. Well, it only took 5 minutes, literally 5 minutes. And I said, I'll be all supportive of it. What can I do for you, Chancellor? And he said, we'd just like you to get it through the Senate. So we went to work on that. And it didn't prove as hard as you might think. We kept it simple. We said, you know, the Turnpike has an authority, and this will be the hospital authority. Hospital, Turnpike, pretty much the same thing. So by keeping it simple, we got it through the Senate and off to the House. Well, the House came up with some toxic amendments, as they oftentimes did. I might say, I see we have at least one House member here. I hope he doesn't take offense. And so they put 3 toxic amendments on there, and we couldn't get them to take them off. And we negotiated and we negotiated and we negotiated, and this is the 97 session, not 98. That's not a mistake. It's the 97 session. And so coming down to the end of the legislative session, where it's going to adjourn for the year, won't be back in for about 7 or 8 months. We're there with all the work done. The budget's been passed and everything. And all 165 legislators, all the members of the Senate, all the members of the House, they're done. They're all waiting for us. All the staff. And it gets to be 2:30 in the morning. And all the budgets have been passed and so forth. But Dick Bond, many of you will remember Dick Bond with fond memories. Dick Bond came in, we were in his office actually negotiating, came in and said, Dave, it's time to go home. We can't get this done. So we went home, but the Chancellor, to his everlasting good credit, over the summer, worked with the House, figured out some workarounds on those amendments, and the next year we passed it quite readily.
Amazing story, amazing. Well, I want to give you a chance to reflect a little bit. So as you look back now, did you believe the hospital becoming independent would be as successful as it has been as we're sitting here today 25 years later?
Well, Joe, that's a very easy question. My expectations were only that the hospital gets stabilized and have at least a modest amount of success, and we wouldn't have to subsidize it. So they exceeded my expectations within a couple of years, and every graph we would look at turned around in 98. Every graph, patient satisfaction, cash on hand, everything turned around in 98. We're so proud. We feel so smart for having seen the wisdom in this plan.
Fantastic. Thank you, Senator. A key piece of this puzzle was putting together the new structure from 2 existing ones, the university side and the hospital side. Certainly not an easy task, and that's where the Polsinelli law firm came in. The lead on that project is a man whom the health system later inducted into its Hall of Fame, Frank Ross. Frank couldn't be with us today, but he did give us a great description of the most compelling discussions that took place during that time.
And on the 1st of May or so, we started on the work to get to the separation, which we knew had to occur on October 1st. No ifs, ands, or buts, for a lot of different reasons, many of them tied to the movement of an entire workforce. So it began every Saturday. We would meet in Lawrence at the Chancellor's office from 8 a.m. until about 2 p.m. every Saturday. We would spend the week then drafting what was discussed during that Saturday, and that went on for the entire summer and the month of September. And that led to the closing date, which was September 30th, to be effective on October 1st. We were connected, and so many things overlapped. And that, yes, they had separate identities then that were going to be even more separate once the transfer took place, they were still, the hospital and the university were still tied at the hip in so many ways. And so it was just a very laborious process. There was the affiliation with the medical school, the affiliation with the nursing school, services for security, IT, landscaping, parking, just a number of things that had to be addressed, thought through, significant drafting, lots of discussions back and forth. The chancellor was a class act. He led a team to make sure that we were on schedule, but it was a very, very busy summer that year.
John, I've heard that during that period of time you carried the act with you every day. There's some people in the audience that think you're going to pull it out of your jacket as we sit here right now. But why? Why were you carrying the act around all the time?
I hate to disappoint those folks, but it's in a box of my office stuff back at the house. But as Frank said, we had 7 months of negotiations after the act was signed into law and printed in the register and took effect. And we needed to get this done by the 30th of September. Every document was designed around that date. And so you have to remember that most of the people in the campus were really not that familiar with what we were trying to do. We did have town hall meetings for the employees of the hospital, but a lot of employees were 50% university and 50% hospital in their job structure. We had to separate that out. We had to do all these different things, different purchasing, different contracting systems, different insurance systems, different pension plan, all these different things. And again, over that 7 months, a lot of folks on the campus didn't really understand what authority we had to be having these discussions because they weren't involved over the last 2 years like many of the rest of us did. And so it became very helpful to me and very essential to be able to pull out a piece of paper with the act on it and say, see right here, section 4, we have the ability to set up our own purchasing system, and we don't have to do that, but let's talk about how we can get that done. And oddly enough, it took several years to where it was still in my best interest to carry that around with me, even after we had had the authority and we're on about our business. The other thing I don't like to admit publicly, but I will this day, was I have pride of ownership in the act. I was one of the 3 people that drafted the first few drafts of that, along with Marlon Ryan and Victoria Thomas, who many of you in the room may remember. And we spent a lot of cordial 12-hour days going through law books and statutes and looking about things that we needed to change and adjust. And so I do have some pride of ownership, and so I hate to admit it, but I did feel proud to carry that act around with me for a long period of time.
That's fantastic. Governor Graves, I want to turn to you. As governor, when did you know something needed to happen, and why did you decide to support the new approach and sign the act into law?
Well, I think this is one of those classic examples of how relationships really do matter in life. And I thought the world of Bob Hemenway. I thought he was just a great chancellor. And so just like when he went and talked to Dave, when he came in and told you what needed to happen, I believed him. Dick Bond, who was president of the Senate, was a great friend, and Dick wanted to see this happen. Dave did yeoman's work trying to get this through the legislature. I had a cabinet secretary named Rochelle Chronister, who at one point was the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, but she was a devoted KU supporter, and she believed this was the right thing to do. And I have to confess, Frank Ross is probably my best friend, and it didn't hurt that Frank would stop by every now and then and encourage me to find a way to support this. But and I had a bias as well. I had executive branch experience. I appreciate that Dave acknowledged that not everything the legislature does actually works out very well. And this was one of those examples where I think having the hospital out from underneath the thumb of state government was just critical to its success going forward. And while on that point, thanks to all of you, thanks to you and those who have come before you and those who are following, because you've made us look good. And that's sort of the history of being a governor. Other people tend to make you look good, and this is one of those examples where I couldn't be prouder to have played a role in the success you all have achieved.
It's fantastic. Governor, do you have memories of what the discussions were going on behind the scenes at this period of time as the act's getting ready and then passed?
Well, I certainly remember the legislative food fight that was going on, and it was not pleasant at times. The thing that many would not know is that part of the act created the ability for the board to sort of self-perpetuate itself going forward. It took the authority away from the governor. I had the opportunity to appoint the initial board, but then from that point forward, the board would make decisions about those names that would be sent to the then sitting governor to continue service on the board. And governors giving up the power of appointment is just not done. It's just not anything that governors want to let go of. And I had a lot of resistance amongst some of my staff about agreeing to that provision. But again, it was absolutely the right thing to do, because the skill set and what the hospital needed in terms of board perspective and qualifications and commitment was something that only they could sort of help self-perpetuate, and we didn't need to risk future governors making bad decisions about who would be on the board of this hospital. So again, I'm glad I listened to good advice.
Fantastic. So we're approaching the end of Act 2. So the final word's going to go to you, Governor. When you look back, is this where you thought the hospital, now the health system, would be 25 years later?
No, I think I'm a little bit like Dave. I thought we might, kick the can down the road, survive, sort of get the feet under us, so to speak, and but to see the phenomenal success, having health care for your citizens is something a governor always aspires for, but we've created a nation's best, world-class facility that I'm just very proud exists in my home state.
Absolutely. Let's give a round of applause to the governor and this panel. So it's the end of Act 2. We really appreciate our panelists that have been up here. We're going to play a little musical chairs and bring up some new panelists as well. All right, we're on to Act 3. And now we're going to look at those tender years between the establishment of the authority in 1988 and when things really started to turn around in the early 2000s. We'll welcome some new panelists. They've just come up here, and I think most of you know most of these people. President and CEO Bob Page is right to my left. President of the Kansas City Division, Tammy Peterman, is to his left. And the Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Steve Stites, is on the stage as well. If we could give them a round of applause. Towards the center, we're also very pleased to welcome Charlie Sunderland to the stage. Charlie is a Legacy Hall of Fame awardee and is a one-of-a-kind supporter of the health system. As many of you know, he announced in this very room just earlier this year a lead gift of $100 million for a new cancer center building. Charlie, welcome and thank you. We're also very pleased to hear an early board chair, Bob Hans, also a Legacy Hall of Fame awardee. He was not able to join us today, so we've done that via a pre-recorded video. Bob told us why he wanted to serve on the board right out of the gate and how he approached his role as chair.
Anyone that has been on a board will understand this. One of the biggest things we did was get out of the way. We had an excellent management team, and the last thing they needed was to have the board interfering. It was very clear that the board did governance and the management did management. And that was emphasized throughout the organization. Also, at the time, George Fahar was the board chair, and he had a strong emphasis on patient care and kind of used the baseball saying, build it and they will come. And so by having good patient care, an emphasis on quality, the board, and also taking some risks. We ended up as a board, as you probably know, taking back the cancer business that had been outsourced at the time. And we also were provided the funds to bring the cardiologists over from St. Luke's. And those two things certainly helped in bringing the hospital along. And I give great credit to management, but also the board's support.
Charlie, I'm going to turn to you. In addition to being a significant donor to the health system, you served on the quality committee when the new hospital started. Why did you want to be a part of the quality committee, and how did the focus on quality begin to shape the hospital's future and culture?
Well, as you heard earlier from Irene and a number of others, the quality reputation of this hospital was not strong in the early years. As we began looking at the future and how we would get these various coalitions to come together, we had of course, the med school and the hospital. It was really Tammy was the driving force in the quality committee, who came with the idea that we can coalesce this group around the critical focus of quality, because we were seeing competition in the market. We had to improve quality, and we wanted to be the place where was the first choice of patients, not where you had to come second or third choice. So we pulled together that committee, and it was this group on stage right here, and we had some physicians, very constructive physician leaders that really wanted to focus on quality. We had a handful of board members, and so we had a really good representation here, and I thought it was an opportunity to really focus the culture that really needed a driving force to blend the culture, because we were all coming from different agendas, as you've heard earlier. And it was an opportunity to focus on patient care, the best patient experience we could find and deliver. And I thought it started out tentatively. We kind of felt our way around what kind of conversations could we have, but it quickly became very candid, very constructive, and we're able to focus on quality metrics that we all agreed on, and that we could continue to focus on a very regular basis, and have the discipline to make sure that we were hitting quality metrics and moving forward. And today, the hospital is probably one of the very leaders in the academic medical field in terms of quality.
It's fantastic. Bob, let me turn to you. Early on, the staff didn't know how bad things really were. How did you approach the need for transparency, and why was it important, and how did people react as you went through that journey?
So I showed up in 1996. Irene hired me as the Department of One, called Organizational Improvement, catchy phrase. And what I was struck by when I first got here was a sentiment across the organization that we didn't have any data. So you have a 500-bed hospital that doesn't have data, and yet you're providing care to patients. That didn't make any sense to me. And what I quickly found out was we had data, we just didn't have access to the data. So I remember I was officed right next to Chris, wherever Chris is, up on the 5th floor, And I would get those old green bar computer reports, and I'd get some paper and a pencil and a 10 key, and I'd start putting some data together. And then when we started that, and then we started to find other data sources, and we put that together, what we did was we had the courage to put Irene out on the road. And so we gave her a set of transparencies. For those of you who are old enough to remember, that's what we used back then. So we gave her an entire presentation of transparencies, and she held town halls all throughout the week, day, night, weekend. And anyone that would come and listen, she took the gloves off and told the story. And I've been in academic medicine my entire life, and sometimes there's an arrogance in academic medicine. If you don't know any better, you think you're the best. And it was interesting to watch her go out and tell people how dire things really were. But what you knew and what you've heard all day so far is we had great people here. And so those people took that to heart, and they started to try to figure out what were we going to do to turn this around. Now, of course, what you do when you start putting data out is the first reaction is the data is inaccurate. The second reaction is that data doesn't apply to me. And once you get through all those arguments, you finally get people to wrap their arms around it and wrap their heads around it. And that's what we started to see. And as we started to show progression in performance, you saw more and more momentum and more excitement. But really, the initial reaction was nobody knew how things were here because we didn't ever tell the story.
Amazing. Tammy, to you, the formula's been a mainstay of the health system. How was it created, and why do you think it continues to work to this day?
You know, I'd love to tell you that was very strategic, and we sat down and we developed this formula and put it on a piece of paper, and then we shared it with everyone. That isn't how it happened. What really happened was, as a new organization, you had to figure out what you were going to focus on. And we knew we couldn't focus on everything. We may have tried for about a minute to focus on everything, and we just couldn't. We knew early on that our business was providing care to patients and families. So, okay, if that's our business, then where are you going to focus? You can focus on a couple different things. We said we needed to focus on patient satisfaction. We needed to focus on quality. We also ask the public, we ask some of our patients, like, what's really important? When you come to a hospital, what's important to you? And they said, I want to know I'm going to be treated really well, and I want to survive. So we said, okay, well, that's good news. We can figure that out. So we said, let's focus first on patient satisfaction. We didn't focus on quality first. We focused on patient satisfaction. I think we thought it was easier. We said, you know what, people come to work and they want to do the right thing and they want to do good work. Everyone in healthcare knows you go into healthcare to do good and right things, and you want to treat people well. So we started with patient satisfaction. You know, we were really bad at it. We were at the 5th percentile. We got to the 10th. I remember the day we sat in the conference room in HEO. It was the only conference room we had at that point in time, and we said, we've got to focus on patient satisfaction. This was after we had been focusing on it for a while, and we said, maybe we could give everyone a $50 gift card if we could get to the 50th percentile. Well, we were calculating how many people do you think would really have to give it to, and we said, okay, let's just tell them we're going to do it. Well, we never had to give it to anybody in those early years because we didn't get there. But we did focus on patient satisfaction, and we focused on it by training people. You all have heard that story. And then we said, let's focus on quality. I remember meeting with all of the clinical chairs, the department chairs, and we said, let's figure out what our quality metrics are. That's how we got to risk-adjusted mortality. And we quickly knew that you can't do either of those things without the right people supported in the best and right way. And that's how the formula came to be. I think Terry Rusconi probably was the first to put it on a piece of paper to say, this is what we're doing. Because then we said, if those things are strong, you know what, the growth will happen because people will want to come here. And that means we'll be financially sustainable as well. And we've never flipped that formula. Even during the pandemic, we didn't flip the formula. Many organizations start with growth and start with finance because they have to, or they feel that they have to. We said we have to start with the patient. So I think that was how it really worked. And I know when Irene and Scott and John, you were probably there too, went to the bond markets, and we didn't, because we didn't have any money. We needed to go borrow money, and they told our story. And thank heavens they believed our story because we didn't have any proof at that time, but they believed our story, and our story was we're going to focus on patients.
Wow, amazing. Yep. To this day still.
And that is our formula today. We have never changed that formula. That's how we make decisions. That's how we do our work. It's a focus on those three things.
Fantastic. Dr. Stites, I'm going to turn to you. What were the changes for physicians when the hospital became independent and as the hospital began to focus on quality the way that Tammy has described it?
Yeah, that was a long time ago in a land far, far away. And a couple of thoughts. First, you have to think about where we really were back then. The average age of our medical staff in 96, 97, 98 was about 55 to 60. Because John Jackson made a great point a little while ago that all the other people, like kind of those mid-level folks, they'd all left because they just didn't feel the hope. And then you had the young folks like me who were just like, hey, I've got a job. Thank God I have a job. And we were running around thinking we're teaching, doing all this great stuff. We thought we were pretty hot stuff. But there weren't very many of us. And we could feel the pain because you'd stand up in the ICU. I was a medical ICU physician back then. And from the unit 44C, and a patient would get sick. We have to send them to St. Luke's because we didn't have the people at KU to take care of them. Imagine feeling like that you were a place where you're supposed to be teaching people, and what you were teaching is we couldn't take care of them. We sent them somewhere else. We had 175 medical students and 144 patients. Half of them couldn't talk. Do the math. 3 medical students per patient. That's not a good way to educate people. Our residents sometimes went out sunbathing in the middle of the day because they didn't have any work to do. We were in a difficult, difficult place. And so then this whole legislative thing came about. We said we're going to spin off from the university. And I think for a lot of us in the medical staff, we were like, oh, thank God there's some hope. And for some of the medical staff, they resisted because it meant change. They didn't know what change meant to them. They'd been here for a long time. But what happened is the focus shifted. And it shifted from saying, what's in it for me, to saying, what's in it for our patients, which is where it should have been the entire time. I told this story earlier today. I remember sitting in Bob's office. And you have to know, Bob's office was not in the CO ring back then. It was back in the Wesco Pavilion. And it was on the 2nd floor, and there was no air conditioning back then. I don't think there still is at Wesco. I don't know. So Bob had a window unit with an air conditioner. I was a lung doctor. I'd walk into that unit, and Bob would be sitting in his chair, and he'd say, man, I don't know, I can't get people to focus on quality. I'm like, I can't stop focusing on the air conditioner. What the heck's blowing out of that air conditioner? We kept saying it, we've got to try to focus on quality. And I remember Tammy and I would walk around Unit 46, and we'd say, are you getting very good care today? And patients would say no. And we'd say, why? We started telling that story. And he started showing physicians their data. And man, physicians don't like it when they don't look good in data. And again, well, I'm an ICU doctor. I thought we could rule the world. Observed predicted mortality, 1.6. By the way, that's bad. And you said to yourself, why aren't we better than that? And the answer is, it's never about one person. It's about a team. And it's about a journey. And it's about trying to work together with people and to turn it around. And the quality committee 2 nights ago, Tim Williams was pointing, look at that observed or predicted mortality in the ICU. It's 0.44. And you see, that's who we are. It's not who we were in 1996, 1997, 1998. We were a struggle bus. And you could see it when we had to send patients out of KU to get better levels, higher levels of care. So the medical staff in 1998, I think we had no idea what was about to come. But I think, especially for those of us who are young and wanted this place to work better than anything else in their lives, well, except home, of course, we wanted that hope that things were going to get better. And we started talking about quality, and we started talking about outcomes, and we watched some investments back into facility, and you could just begin to feel liftoff and achieving it. And we could keep good young people here who wanted to stay and be as part of our staff, as opposed to always leave and go somewhere else. I think it was a time of change and a time of hope.
Great story. Tammy, the partnership between nursing and physicians has always been a hallmark of the health system. How was that developed, and what was the role of Magnet in that process?
Sure, and I will tell you, just as a lot of people were leaving the hospital from the medical staff, a lot of people in nursing left the hospital early on as well, and nursing wasn't at all what it is today. Nursing is awesome at our place today, you all know that, but it wasn't that way in the late 90s and the early 2000s, and we had to really work. In order to truly be a partner with the physicians, the nursing needed to improve a lot of things. We had to raise the bar in terms of professionalism and a number of aspects in nursing, which we did, but as we were on that journey, we also knew that relationship with the medical staff was important. And early on, we had what we call the medical director, hospital director partnerships. Those started very early, and actually before the public authority. And those were, I think, Bob, you started those. And we had a few of those individuals who were partnered. They were medical leaders who partnered with a hospital leader, but who do you think the hospital leader was? It was a nurse. And we started those partnerships. And I think as that partnership was developed and became stronger, and we had them in the ICU, and we had them in a number of our programs, people realized the importance of one another and the importance of working together. And I think that was maybe the early on beginning of that. I also believe that as we started that Magnet journey, and many of you know what Magnet is, it's a designation given for nursing excellence, and it's about competence and education and professionalism and all these wonderful things. It's about outcomes for patients. We don't call it just Magnet nursing at our place. It's about our entire hospital, because we know it takes the entire team to work together. But what I believe is that journey really propelled the relationship with nursing and the medical staff. I think today, if you ask any member of the medical staff, they will always compliment nursing. They do it on a very regular basis. We also know that many other disciplines work together as a team, and it takes the entire team. But I think it was that Magnet journey early on that helped propel nursing forward. We were focused on all the right things, but I think it was also that relationship and that trust that we started having with the medical staff as we developed some programs. The Rapid Response Team, for instance, was a partnership with the medical staff, in the medical ICU, and the nurses in the ICU, and respiratory therapy. They pulled together to really develop that pretty remarkable program. But I think there were 1,000 things, and we don't have 1,000 hours up here, but I know Steve and I could probably talk about this for a very long time, but those are a few of the things.
Yeah, great. I'm going to toss it back to Dr. Stites. Why was clinical integration so important to how the health system has evolved, and what has it meant for the medical center overall?
Yeah, thank you. But can I just first say I think it was the Magnet journey that made the single biggest difference in the transformation of KU Hospital. And because it raised the bar of quality so significantly here. You know, there was a part of 1998 that was just remarkable. It gave you a whole new slate to write on and think about how to reinvent yourself. But it didn't answer the question about the relationship completely between the medical staff and the hospital, because the medical staff is still very independent. Every department here was a company. I was the chair of medicine and for a while, and I could go build my own building. I could go get my own bonds. I could do all this weirdo stuff. And so the net impact on our campus was there were like 23 different CEOs, and some of us were pretty broke, but we all thought we were in charge, and it was impossible to have a strategy that was coherent. And I think about COVID, and I think about the things we're doing today, and you would say it would never have been possible. And from the university perspective, they were still trying to run some of the clinical enterprise and not having the money or the resources really to do it. Clinical integration took all of the clinical departments here, which were separate 501c3 corporations, blended them and pushed them together into one. And granted, I say it, make it sound like it happened overnight, and it took like 6 years. But we then became enjoying the hospital and became truly a health system at that point. And if you step back and you look at the progress that we've made since then, I mean, if you look at the growth and you look around the campus, you say, wow, something happened, something fairly magical. I mean, in 2016, we had 700 doctors, and today we have almost 1,300 physicians, and that doesn't even count the medical staff in Olathe who's joining us. If you looked at the amount of federal grant money that's inside the university, it's grown dramatically since then. This was the other major cornerstone that could line up with the direction that happened with the Authority Act and say, now we've really got this organized. Now we're really on the same team. And now we can do things that, frankly, I don't know anyone in the country that can match what we're going to be able to do in the next 10 years. So I think 2016, having all the departments melded into one, pivotal moment in our history.
Fantastic. You know, earlier we heard from Bob Hans on the early first days of the Authority Board. We're going to go back to part of that video and let Bob tell us what he's most proud of.
I have just been a very small part of it as a board member, but have certainly seen an amazing turnaround. And it shows what people working together, people believing in what they're doing and having a passion for it, as well as patient care and quality, can get done. 25 years ago, I don't think anyone would have believed that the KU Hospital is where it is today. Now, in saying all that, that doesn't mean that the folks that are still driving the engine can relax. I think the best days are yet to come, but it'll take a lot of hard work. And I truly feel that we have the right team and the right board in place to make that happen.
Charlie, you've given your time and treasure on a grand scale here. What potential do you think the health system has moving forward as we sit here today?
Well, this has been a good day to look 25 years back. And I think it's a time to really think forward and think about what is this place going to look like 25 years from today? Now, none of us can predict that. But clearly, Kansas City needs a world-class medical center that can deliver state-of-the-art health care for our region. And that is such a valuable resource that it really transcends what you do here at KU. It goes on to allow the community economic development, attracting businesses attracting talent. It just goes on and on. And so what we hope to see and why we would invest in this med center is that the trajectory will continue, that we've seen, and we've seen now what 25 years can do. And if we can continue this trajectory for the next 25 years with the kind of people that we have here, and I think that's one of the constants that you've heard through the 25 years is really great people. And that was one of the first things that impressed me when I came on this board, after hearing a lot of stories and a lot of things that would set you back, like, wait a minute, really? It's the people that really made it happen. And so our hope is that 25 years from now, you're going to have a thriving, world-class, national leading med center that is an engine of growth and quality of life for the entire region.
Fantastic. Bob, last question in this segment. We've heard the legislature saw the decision to make the hospital independent health authority as a Hail Mary pass. Did you ever imagine what the health system would accomplish?
You know, before I answer that, Joe, I'm trying to imagine what Steve Stice looked like sunbathing over here.
I didn't say I went out there.
Oh,
Look
okay.
at this kid. Do you think I went out there? I didn't.
Yeah. So, you know, it's interesting. I spent 16 years in St. Louis before I came here in 1996. And when I got here, what I was so impressed by was what Charlie just talked about, the people. And so I believe in my heart what differentiates our place from any other place is this incredible combination of competence and humility. I've been in other places where competence is equal, but arrogance accompanies that competence, and that's not the case here. In addition to that, there's a competitive spirit here that is unparalleled. I still remember, and John, you'll remember this, when the consultants told us back in 1998, or other people told us that patients wouldn't leave Johnson County to come to our campus for care. And so today, when Tammy and I get to show that graphic that shows that we've got patients from every state in the country and 26 countries internationally, our little chip on our shoulder goes away for a few minutes, right? Because we've been able to prove those experts wrong. So if I were back now in 1996 or 1998 looking forward, did I see a vision of being where we are today? I would think no. But what I knew in my heart was we had the right people. And if you give the right people the freedom to do what they think is best, as long as the patient is at the center of every one of those decisions, I think absolutely that's why we're where we are today. And I think that's what makes the next 25 years even more exciting.
Amazing. Amazing. Let's just give a round of applause to the panel. We're going to keep going. I can't help myself but reflect on just what we've heard to right now, and we've got a final act coming up. But it really is quite amazing to hear the stories that you all just told, and then reflecting back to some of our elected leaders, the senator and the governor, the willingness of those elected officials to give up some positional power, quite frankly, and the legislature itself, to sort of free this institution to get creative and embrace change. It just doesn't happen all the time. It's a unique thing. It's very special what has occurred, and what has led here is just over the top kind of stuff. It is kind of like a movie. And the story unfolding in the discussion feels that way. We all kind of know the ending, but we're still anxious to see how it's turning out. I mentioned in the beginning that the story feels like we're in 3 acts: where we were, what happened, and how we got to where we are today. A few important people wanted to offer their perspective on the importance of the University of Kansas health system. The first is Quint Studer, who got his start as a special education teacher in the 1970s, eventually found his way into healthcare marketing, and served as a chief operating officer at one hospital and president of another. He created the Studer Institute, the Studer Community Institute, and is now co-founder of his Healthcare Plus Solutions Group. Quint is known in healthcare circles and beyond for his focus on staff and staff focus on service. He has a lot in common with both Bob and Tammy.
I don't know if there's ever been a better transformation, and I work with healthcare forever. If somebody would have told me in the 1990s that in 2023 you'd be looking at the University of Kansas health system and what it's accomplished, and by mean what it's accomplished, it's all, why does it exist? It exists to heal people. And when you look at the clinical outcomes, I think one of the things they always did right was they kept the mission of healing in front of them. It wasn't about a financial number, it was healing. And I think that mission and purpose, so if we improve clinical outcomes, we have to improve some other things. We have to make sure the employees are engaged, and they're very committed to employee engagement. You have to make sure the physicians have a great place to practice medicine. So I think they kept their true north from the very, very beginning.
Next, we'll hear from the Chancellor of the University of Kansas, a physician himself. Dr. Doug Girod served as chair of ENT and executive vice chancellor of the University of Kansas Medical Center before becoming KU's 18th chancellor. He's a head and neck surgeon and knows this story as well as anyone.
25 years in some senses has gone very quickly, and others it seems like it was an eternity ago when the authority was created and the spin out. And of course, I joined the university before that, the medical center before that, and to see the transition of where we were pre-authority with, struggling with infrastructure, struggling with facilities, struggling with patient care, quite honestly, and quality, and patient numbers, to see what we've been able to do since the authority was created is just astonishing. To be in the #1 hospital in the state, #1 hospital in the region, and a top performer nationally from a quality, certainly quality and patient care perspective, but also the growth of the research engine that's come up right alongside that with the Cancer Center, Alzheimer's Disease Center, and just research really across the spectrum is just absolutely outstanding, and people should take great pride in that. And as Bob and Tammy like to say, proud but never satisfied.
Finally, a longtime friend of the health system, Legacy Hall of Fame awardee, and a public servant through and through, the Honorable Jerry Moran, United States Senator from Kansas, joined us by video to describe how the entire state has benefited from the University of Kansas health system.
It's a great deal for the citizens of Kansas and really the region to have an academic medical center where people are cared for in a hospital, where in association with the University of Kansas School of Medicine, we train physicians and other healthcare providers for hospitals and clinics, and just to take care of Kansans across the state It brings economic activity, certainly to the Kansas City region, and it brings some of the smartest and brightest people here who are interested in medicine. It's just, what a wonderful development it has been. The things that have happened in 25 years to make the University of Kansas the health system that it is. And by that, I mean highly professional, capable, caring, compassionate, determined. It's been a real service to the people of our state.
Bob and Tammy, I'm going to turn it over to you to end our discussion today with where the health system is going and its impact.
They did want us to fall off the stage. Okay, well, first of all, this has just been loads of fun. And as I've been sitting here listening to these great stories, I feel like we should have another story hour, because I think there are some more stories that we should share. There are some pretty remarkable things that have happened. And I think about when we were meeting yesterday or the day before, and Governor Graves said, I didn't have a really big part in this. I just signed the act. And we went, oh my gosh, you had a huge part in this. And when I think about the fact that the way our board is determined was a debate, of course it was a debate, and you had to give up a whole lot of control. And we're better because of that. So some amazing things. And I think about what Charlie Sunderland has done for our organization in so many ways. And he would be really proud of what happens at the quality committee meetings. But I also want you to know that one of the things he told Bob and I a number of years ago, many years ago, he said, you all need to make sure that you control the destiny of this hospital, not just from what you're doing inside. We're in charge. You're going to take care of that. But pay attention to what happens outside the walls. Pay attention to the area surrounding it. So we've done that. And we've worked from an economic development standpoint to really pay attention to our campus and the areas surrounding. So lots of great things. But what we wanted to do was spend just a few minutes and look at a couple milestones over time. There are thousands of milestones, and we just put a few on this list. And you can see, the early one, it was the hospital authority, and then you can see there were a number of other things that happened very early on. We've talked about cardiology and cancer, and then the next one, of course, Magnet. And we were first recognized by U.S. News in 2007. We've been recognized every year since 2007, many times and certainly as the best hospital in Kansas and Kansas City. Those things we'll never take for granted, but it's nice to see them on a timeline. And you can see we were ranked number 2 in UHC now Vizient organization. The next section, which is just a lot of things. I think that our sports medicine program really took a major jump when we became the healthcare provider for the Royals and the Chiefs. That was a very big deal. Clinical integration. Dr. Stites talked about the importance of clinical integration. Obviously, during that time period, it was our first NCI designation as well. And then a lot of things have happened in the last 6 or 7 years when you can see a number. This is all about growth. When you think about this last section, it's about opening Cambridge Tower A. It's about adding Topeka and Great Bend and Olathe. It's about making sure that we have enough space in a number of places. We launched Kansas Team Health. A number of things happened during that time. So a lot of really amazing things have happened. We could have made this much longer and much deeper, but we wanted to share just a few highlights.
I hope you guys are having as much fun as we've had. To be honest, it's been therapeutic, to be really honest. We've been sitting around telling stories for the last week. I think we're going to tell stories for the rest of the year. And some of them you'll never hear because we can't share those stories, but a lot of them have been part of the fabric of who we've become. So I think it's safe to say that we have become a provider of choice, and we've become an employer of choice, and we've become a destination for healthcare, some things that people never thought were possible 25 years ago. And I want to thank Joe Reardon and his colleague Tim Cowden, who told us to also focus on the economic engine that we've become. Because I will tell you, for all the healthcare people in the room, it's not what we wake up and think about. We don't think about being an economic engine. We think about taking great care of patients and providing the best service possible. So Tammy and I had an opportunity to be with Joe and Tim And within seconds of each other, they said to us, you guys are an economic engine. And I hearken back, Joe, to when you were the mayor of the unified government, and I'd come over and I'd say, and that's when the legends had taken off. And I'd say, you know, someday we're going to be your next legends. Well, if I remember right, you told us that evening you have surpassed the legends, and we had no idea. So then we got on a plane and we flew up to Rochester and we looked at what Mayo had done, and we came back and we formed an economic development group and took off on that. And then we said, you know, we probably ought to do an economic impact study. Thanks to you guys, we did that. We did one in 2018, and then we did another one in 2021. And this is the story we're starting to share, and this is getting a lot of traction. So we wanted to share this with you. So it's been an exciting time in Kansas City, right? So a couple of months ago, we had the NFL draft. And I think those numbers have been finalized. $164 million was the economic impact of the NFL draft on Kansas City for the 3 days it was here. We've gotten the great news that we have the World Cup coming in 2026. It'll be here for 6 weeks. And I think the estimate for the economic impact on the World Cup is in the neighborhood of $700 million. And now we want to share with you that the economic impact of the University of Kansas health system on the metro area is $6.42 billion a year. And what differentiates us is we're not one and done. We're here to stay, we're here to grow. And here's a fun fact for all of you Travis Kelce, Taylor Swift fans. We just saw the economic impact of the Eras Tour. It's $5 billion a year for the entire country, so we've even surpassed Taylor Swift. So I think we're good to go. So the next thing we've been doing is we've been trying to use this phrase imagine here throughout the history of the last 25 years. And we challenge ourselves as an executive team with our board sometimes to just imagine what's the next best thing we're going to do. We did it back in 2011, and we're doing it now. And we want to share with you the new work that we've done around Imagine, because I think this will be transformative on top of what we've already accomplished. So the overarching umbrella of this question is imagine the day that you don't have to leave Kansas City for world-class healthcare. Now, I think we could argue that that day's already arrived, but we still have some flags we need to plant. And our board has challenged us not to just talk about bricks and mortar, but what do you want to be known for? And so that's what we want to share with you today, and we're going to start with cancer. The reality is we are a destination for cancer. The reality is cancer is no longer a death sentence. But if you look into the future of cancer care, it's about cellular therapeutics. And we have become a destination and a national and worldwide expert in cellular therapeutics. In fact, we've had trials done on this very campus for the first time in the world. People don't know that, but that's the future of cancer care. That's going to happen right here in Kansas City, and I can personalize that. March of 2020, I was diagnosed with a very aggressive prostate cancer. And I got the opportunity, and it was found by my primary care physician during my annual physical. I had the opportunity to sit with Ron Chen and with Will Parker, two world-renowned prostate cancer experts on our team. I got taken care of here. I had my surgery. 3.5 years later, I am cancer-free, and I did not leave Kansas City. I got my care here, my treatment here, and my life was saved because I lived right here in Kansas City. The second flag we're going to plant is in brain health and Alzheimer's. You may or may not know this, but we have two world-renowned Alzheimer's experts on our campus, Jeff Burns and Russ Swerdlow. In fact, the work they are doing has turned heads nationally and internationally to the point now where other researchers are following their work. And now to personalize that again, my wife was diagnosed with Alzheimer's a few years ago. She was diagnosed here. She's getting treated here. She didn't have to leave Kansas City. We're not leaving Kansas City. We have the experts right here. Imagine the day we become the destination for brain health and Alzheimer's care across the world.
You know, the next area or the next flag that we want to plant is really about precision medicine. You know, it's the way of the future, and we've all heard people talk about it. You know what? That's what we're doing here. That's what we're going to do. We just received Dr. Ojo as the lead PI on a study called All of Us, and this will be a 4-state region. We'll be in the Midwest Consortium. There are only 10 in the country. We're one of those 10. We'll be the lead here in the Midwest with Nebraska, Iowa, and Missouri, and it's called All of Us. And this is about precision medicine. So expect to see us in the future in terms of being one of the nationally recognized organizations moving forward with precision medicine. The next one is one that we also have said, we talked about before. We have a great sports medicine team. They're taking care of the Royals, and they're taking care of the Chiefs. Now we have Kansas Team Health, but they're also taking care of sports medicine athletes or young athletes across the region in high schools and in other schools. We believe that there's also a niche that needs to be met that isn't met right now in this country, and that's taking care of the female athlete. We know that there's a difference with our female athletes. We need to take care of those female athletes. We've started that program already. We know that there's opportunity for us to continue to grow that. That's yet another flag that we're going to plant. We think that's the right thing to do. Will there be more? There will be. But these 4 we wanted to share now with all of you. We also have a video that we'd like to share with you. Some of you have seen it before. This is a video that was developed after we did that trip to Mayo, and we started working across campus and with developers in Kansas City and with community leaders, and we said, what is this campus going to look like? What will this look like, not just in 2 or 3 years, but what will it look like in 10 years and longer? And we did that imagine, and we did that plan, and we said, okay, let's start identifying some of the things we believe this campus and the surrounding areas should look like. So this is a result of some of that brainstorming that we did and some of the planning we did across our campus with people in the community to help us form some of those thoughts. So let's take a listen.
So that's what we think. It's probably 50% accurate, but hey, it's a start. You know, one of the hallmarks of our organization is storytelling, and so Tammy's going to bring us home with a story, but before she does that, I just want to say thank you. I want to say thank you to all the folks that have been on the panel for your vision and your courage and allowing us to do what we've been able to do over the last 25 years. And for all the rest of you in here, thank you for believing in us. Those that work here, thanks for everything you do every day to take care of patients. This is the best team I've ever had a chance to work with. I am so excited about what we've done and what lies ahead. I will also tell you there's not a better storyteller that I've ever met in my life than Tammy Peterman, so she's going to bring us home with one of those tear-jerking stories about what happens here.
Well, I think they're easy to tell because great things happen at our place every day. And I was thinking about that video, and there's a lot of focus was on bricks and mortar. And, buildings are great because they allow us to do what we do, and they allow our teams to do what they do, and they allow discoveries to take place. But buildings aren't the great places unless you have great people. And I remember telling some kind of a story about bricks and mortar and buildings when we were opening Cambridge Tower A not so long ago. And I want to tell you another story about patients, because that's what we do at our place. We take care of patients. And I'll tell you, our teams, there are 1,000 stories out there. There's a story every unit, every day with every patient. I believe that. But some of these stories are like so powerful, you have to tell them. You have to tell them not just once or twice. You have to tell them time and time again. So this is a story about a young man. This is a true story, of course. This is a story about a young man who was an athlete. He had a traumatic event and ended up at our place. And he was from Louisiana. And his condition was very, very serious. And the staff called the mom of this young man in Louisiana and said, "You're going to need to get here." And she said, "I don't think I can." She had another child that had just started school. She needed to be there. And they said, "No, you're going to need to get here." And she said, I can't. I have a car, but I don't think I can make it to Kansas from 5 states away. They said, "Then you need to get on an airplane." She goes, "I've never been on an airplane." And she said, "I don't have money to do it anyway." So our staff kind of flew into action, and they said, "You know what, we'll get her here. We'll get her on an airplane." And they talked her through how she was going to get on an airplane, from here's how you're going to get through the airport. And they got her the plane ticket. And they got her on that plane, and then she landed at KCI. And who met her? Well, one of our staff met her. And they picked her up, and they brought her to our place. And that's where she stayed, because she wouldn't leave her son's bedside. And then they brought things to her. They gave her meals. They made sure that she had toiletries. They made sure she had clean clothes. They took care of her. And you know what? They didn't tell us the story. We found out about this story much after it happened, because they wanted to do this, not because someone was going to stand at a podium and tell the story, but because that was what they wanted to do. So that young man died at our place, but he died with his mom at his bedside, because our staff said, "We're going to get her on a plane. We're going to tell her how to do it. We're going to pick her up, and we're going to take care of her when she gets here." Our staff take great care of patients every single day. They also take great care of families. And that's just one example of what happens at our place every day. I'll tell you, this story has been fabulous to share the 25-year history. That story wouldn't have happened 25 years ago. It happened because of people in this room that made it happen, and certainly gave us the opportunity to do the things that happen every day in our hospital. I am grateful. I walk into this place every single day, and I'm grateful for the team of people who come to work and do those kinds of things. So thank you for being here. Thanks for listening to our story, and thanks for being a part of it and supporting it. So thanks, everyone.